Well, good morning. Happy Wednesday to you. Wednesday, the 10th of September. It's a beautiful day. It was 70 degrees outside. Just cold enough to where I didn't have to dress warm. But it's not going to last. And it's been hot during the day and cold in the morning. That's kind of always a weird time. Thank you for joining me. There's a train going by right now, and I've noticed that there are less so the shipping containers that they ship in, they come on these trains. It's a lot of shipping containers. And over the last year, I've seen a lot of them where the locks have been broken and they're opened into. But it seems like it's getting less. So that makes me very happy. Less. That means that we're less crime. So let me put it that way. I like a world where there's less crime. Let's see. And the full moon, it's 2 days after the full moon, but the moon is up there in the sky at about, 30 degrees. And it's kind of cool to look at. Very, very bright outside this morning before the sun came up. The moon shadow was very, very bright. Let's see. We have one birthday today. That is the John Lavoie. Happy birthday to you. And may you have a blessed day today. So I'll close that one out. The next birthday is until next week. The train's gone. I can hear that it's gone. All right, we'll close that out. We'll close this out. And let's see. And there is a 15% chance of rain today. So that's exciting. I'm looking and there's a few clouds in the sky. This must be left over from the hurricane that came in, because yesterday I don't think there were any clouds, but now there's clouds in the sky, and there's a 15% chance of rain. And today is trash day, and I'm so happy I've got my trash out, so that makes me happy. I'm always a little bit upset or put out when the trash man comes and I forgot to get the trash can out, because that means I have to hold out for a whole nother week on the trash. Let's see. Tonight is our Wednesday night, and we've really had some great things on our Wednesday night. It launched well this year, and it has been a lot of fun. There's been a lot of good food. I'm so grateful for everybody who prepares that food. And I'm teaching a Wednesday night Basics of Christianity class. I'm really excited about that. Tonight, we're going to take a look at the fall and what that means. We looked at creation last week. We looked at the Bible the previous week. It's been really good, and I'm really excited about this class. I think if you went through there's 26 classes, 13 for the fall and 13 in the spring, and if you went through every single one of those classes, you would have a pretty good basic understanding about the basics of Christianity. And a lot of people have a good understanding of a lot of stuff, but there's pieces that are missing. So I'm not saying you have to come to all of them, but just pick and choose the one that you want to learn more about and come and we'll talk about it. And the class is basically, we do a Bible study for the first half, and then we answer questions in the second half. It's about an hour long, and it's just really been really a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying it. Okay, I think I have something in my peripheral vision. That's why I keep touching my eye, but it could be. It could be anything. At my age, it's spots in my eyes. All right, let's get into our study. Today we're going to look at Leviticus chapter 23. And I have, should I bring this up? I made it a button. Yeah, let me put it over here. Hold on. This is the outline Leviticus. We're in the feasts, the elements of worship in the name of God. That's 23 and 24. And then sanctifying the land, blessing and curses. And then chapter 27, which closes it out. So we're getting close to the end of Leviticus. I imagine within maybe by the end of next week, we might be finished in Leviticus. The plan at this point is to continue. So we have done Genesis, Exodus, we'll have finished Leviticus, and then there's Numbers and Deuteronomy. And I'm inclined to simply go through the rest of Numbers and Deuteronomy. And then we get the whole entire Torah. At some point, we'll have studied it. All right. But we're back in Leviticus 23. So let's just take a look and we'll start reading at verse 1 of chapter 23. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, 'These are my appointed festivals, the appointed festivals of the Lord, which you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies.'" So we're going to go through some festivals. There's spring festivals and fall festivals. And each of these festivals are commemoration festivals of something that God has done or there's something that God will do. And these are all commanded by the Lord. Festivals are a fun time. In the church here, in the Christian church here, we have a lot of festivals. And a lot of them tie into these festivals. So it'll be fun to look at how they tie in, if they tie in. And just talk a little bit about why festivals are important. They're an opportunity for people to gather together and to celebrate, to have joy in their life. I think people love a good festival. Let me put it that way. People love a good festival. For years, we celebrated in Vail 4th of July with fireworks, and it's just fun. I think at our peak, we estimated we had about 8,000 people that came to our fireworks festival. We called it a Colossal Fourth because it was at the Del Lago Golf Course, which is on Colossal Cave Road. So we called it a Colossal Fourth. Very clever idea. And we would bring people together obviously, the 4th of July is an opportunity for people to come together and just celebrate our country. Its founding, the founding principles, how it's lasted for 250 years, all of these things. And, but people love a good festival. So God commands them. So we'll see, and he calls them sacred. He calls them sacred. It's interesting to think of a festival as sacred, but it is. Things like this will bring people together. It's a sacred time. All right, the next festival is the Sabbath. There are 6 days when you may work, but the 7th day is a day of Sabbath rest, a day of sacred assembly. You are not to do any work wherever you live. It is a Sabbath to the Lord. So this Sabbath day, we know that God created the earth in 6 days, and the 7th day he rested. And so on the 7th day, we are to rest, no work. It's this day of sacred assembly. If we come together, that assembly is sacred. Typically, it would be in the assembly of the believers in a household, the Israelites in a household. That's that assembly. They do things on the Sabbath that they don't do on the other days of the week. And they celebrate rest because you cannot work all the time. If all you do is work, you get to the end of your life and say, what was my life for? And we don't want you to get to the end of your life and say, what was my life for? I think God wants you to get to the end of your life and say, it was a wonderful life. I enjoyed it to the fullest, and I didn't just work. Work is, in a sense, work is self-serving. And at some point, you have to give of yourself to other people. You have to enjoy life. There's more to life than just work. Now, interesting is that the week is something that is in every culture. Every culture pretty much celebrates a 7-day work week or a 7-day week. And I think it goes back to creation, where God says you're going to have 6 days where you work and the 7th day you rest. Whether or not other cultures have the same divide on working and resting, there is this idea of a week. And it seems to be ubiquitous throughout the world. All right, let's see the first festival, verse 4. These are the Lord's appointed festivals, the sacred assemblies you are to proclaim at their appointed times. The Lord's Passover begins at twilight on the 14th day of the first month. On the 15th day of that month, the Lord's festival of unleavened bread begins. For 7 days you must eat bread made without yeast. On the first day, hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work. For 7 days, present a food offering to the Lord, and on the seventh day, hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work. So this is the first, is called the Passover. We know that the Passover is celebrated in remembrance of how God rescued the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. And that slavery was something that was horrible. It happened because Joseph ended up being Pharaoh's number 2, and subsequent pharaohs did not like the Israelites. They were foreigners in the land, and so they were enslaved and they were used to build structures that slaves build. The people were brutally enslaved, and so Moses, in a burning bush, received instruction from God to rescue my people, and so Moses went and rescued them. That is a pivotal moment, as the resurrection is for Christianity, as the pivotal New Testament thing, that God would come in and rescue his people from slavery in Egypt is probably the Old Testament equivalent to that. And so it is not surprising that the beginning of the church, or the beginning of the year for the Israelites, is that event. That's what they're going to celebrate first, that pivotal event. In the New Testament, in our time, we could say then we should start with Easter. But before you start with Easter, you got to get Jesus here. So in the church year, we start with the birth of Jesus. That's typically called Christmas. But even before Christmas, there's another part of the church year, which is the anticipation of the birth of Jesus, which we call Advent. So the 4 weeks leading up to the birth of Christ is called Advent. And we celebrate love, joy, peace, and hope. Each one of those is a candle. And because Jesus is bringing all 4 of those things, so we celebrate in anticipation. Now, I'm sorry, going off on a bit of a tangent, but in our world today, what do we do? Well, as soon as Thanksgiving weekend happens, that day after Thanksgiving is a huge shopping day. Is that the Black Friday? I don't like the term Black Friday because it sounds like it's a thing that is dark. And if you're paying all the bills, it could be dark. But it's basically the first day of shopping, and people will go shopping. And and the reason why I bring that up is because when you go shopping on the day after Thanksgiving, what is the music they're playing? It's Christmas music. It's all about Christmas, and it should be about the anticipation of Christmas. We should be singing the O antiphons. O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel. There's 20 verses of the O antiphons that are in that. We should sing one each day, anticipation for the birth of Christ. But the secular world does it their own way. The Christian world should, I don't know if we do a good job of this, but we should be singing songs of hope and anticipation of the birth of Jesus. There's just not a whole lot out there. And people want to spend the whole month of December singing Christmas songs. So I guess we give in. And there's a lot of songs out there that you hear that have nothing to do with the birth of Jesus. And, it's Jingle Bells or Love. And so don't get tied into the whole birth of Jesus or the whole secular idea that all these songs are what it's all about. It's not. It's all about the birth of Jesus. And every song should be about the birth of Jesus. But we live in a world. Have we talked about this yet? maybe we'll close off this Leviticus with an understanding of the whole idea of Leviticus is that the whole nation is to come and to follow God. It's the whole nation that's to celebrate the Passover. And how do you get the whole nation to celebrate the Passover? The whole nation has to have a desire to celebrate the Passover. And this does necessitate a combination of church and state. And we separate them here in the United States because when the church and state are combined, it can cause all sorts of problems. But back then, it was a combination of church and state, and every good Israelite would celebrate the Passover. It was a thing the whole community did. But the whole community lived together in a small community with one person in charge, the king, not yet, who kind of makes sure that all these festivals are celebrated and their heritage is celebrated, who God is and how he rescued, all that's to be celebrated. So the first Passover is the Passover of unleavened bread, and we know that this is in the church here, in the Christian church here, the days before leading up to Jesus' death, they were in Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem. They were in Jerusalem celebrating the Passover because it was commanded by God. And you have a whole bunch of different parts to this. First, you have a pre-Passover where you eat no unleavened bread, and then you celebrate the whole thing of Passover. On the 15th day of the month, unleavened bread, and then for 7 days you eat bread made without yeast. You don't do any regular work on that first day. For 7 days, present a food offering to God, and on the seventh day, hold a sacred assembly. Do no work on that day. Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is not just a one-time event. It's a week. All right, verse 9. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, and you reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain you harvest. He is to wave the sheaf before the Lord, so it will be accepted on your behalf. The priest is to wave it on the day of the Sabbath. On the day you wave the sheaf, you must bring sacrifice as a burnt offering to the Lord, a lamb a year old without defect, together with its grain offering of 2/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with olive oil, a food offering presented to the Lord, a pleasing aroma, and its drink offering of 1/4 of a hin of wine. You must not eat any bread or roasted a new grain until the very day you bring this offering to your God. This is to be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come wherever you live." So this is the festival of first fruits. This is the one where, first of all, this doesn't necessarily have to be celebrated now. It's when they go into the promised land. This is when this festival is started. And so God is anticipating. He's telling the Israelites. He's told them already that they're going to go to the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, which is a metaphor for this land will produce a lot of food for you. It'll produce a lot of blessings for you. This is a land that you will go to, and you will be very, very much blessed. And we know that this is true because the land is a land that produces wonderful food and wonderful blessings for the Israelites. But when that blessing comes, they are to stop and celebrate the first fruits of the crop that comes in at harvest time. The priest waves a sheaf before the Lord, and he does it on the day after the Sabbath, and he sacrifices a burnt offering to the Lord of a lamb that's a year old without defect. And so you have the grain offering, and you have an ephah of flour, and you have olive oil, and you have wine, and all these things come. This is a blessing of the harvest that is about to come. The harvest season lasts for a while, but it is not a bad thing at the beginning of the harvest to stop And remember that all of this is a blessing from God. God is the one that ordained the food. He's the one that created the plants for food. He's the one that created all of these things, the fruits, the vegetables, the offering of the lamb, the offering of all of these things is a blessing from God. And so it is not out of the question that as we come together to do the harvest, that we stop and pause and give thanks to God for the blessing that's about to come. I have been blessed here where I live in Vale. There's a winery that's about 7 miles from my house. Maybe I think it's 7 miles from my house. It's not that far. And I have been blessed to be asked to come and do a blessing at the beginning of the harvest. And there is a blessing that is very, very old, probably 200 or 300 years old, that's a blessing to be done at the harvest time, to talk about, because you have to remember, wineries really, really took off because of this idea of the Passover. Because at the Passover, you have a lot of wine. If you've ever seen a Passover celebration, there's a lot of wine that is consumed. And so in order to have wine that's consumed, you have to have harvest. You have to have grapes that are planted and harvested and crushed and made into wine. And all of this happens at the beginning of the harvest. And so there's a prayer, there's a Christian prayer, there's probably a Jewish prayer too. I should look into that. I usually say the Christian prayer at the beginning of the harvest. And so here you have this winery that's about to produce wine. And I'm just so blessed that they invite me to come in and to say a prayer of blessing over the harvest. And how in the Christian church, the harvest is done for the purpose of the Passover or communion, which happens in remembrance. And so also when you have a meal and you're about to eat, every meal is a blessing. At some level, every meal is a blessing from God. You would not have a single meal ever if God did not produce food from the ground, which is either consumed directly by humans or consumed by animals, which are then consumed by humans. But this whole process is developed by God to feed humanity. And we should then, at every meal, stop and pause and give thanks to God for his incredible blessing, for the food that we're about to eat. And so the offering of the first fruits is the second festival. You have the harvest festival, the Passover festival. This is the Passover comes first, then the offering of first fruits, and then you have the Festival of Weeks. I think before I get into all did I get a graphic here? Yes, here we go. I do have a graphic. So in the spring, you have the Passover, you have the unleavened bread and the first fruits. These are all in the month of Nisan. Remember, how many months do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You have 12 months, and each one of those, it's a lunar month. And what's interesting is that the Gregorian calendar switched us from lunar months to a solar year, because if you follow the lunar months, the spring doesn't always happen at the end of the 12 months. There's actually, it's actually somewhere between 12 and 13 months if you follow a lunar calendar. And so some years you have to add or subtract, add a month in order to make sure that that first month lines up. The first full moon happens after the spring equinox, I guess you could say, which is why Easter is always the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the first equinox. That's when Easter is defined, because the Passover is defined as the first full moon, the first Sunday after, or the first Thursday after the first full moon, actually be Friday, the first Friday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. That's where the month of Nisan starts. And then you have 12 months after that. All right. And that all got changed by Pope Gregory. So that's why we follow the Gregorian calendar. But before the Gregorian calendar, it was all a lunar calendar that was somewhat complicated, but it worked for thousands of years. And lunar calendars are great because you have a moon that you can follow. And, on a solar calendar, it's really, really hard because you have to count weeks in the year, as opposed to having a big, huge, beautiful moon to kind of guide you through the year. All right. I think we'll leave it there. And we'll pick up the Festival of Weeks tomorrow when we gather together. So let's close in prayer. Gracious God, thank you for the blessings that you give us every day. Help us to never stop forgetting those blessings and guide us and keep us safe until we meet again. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let me go over here and see how we're doing. Thank you, all of you, for joining me online. Yes, a 15% chance of rain means an 85% chance of no rain. So yeah, don't hold your breath on the rain. Welcome to all of you joining me. Yes, the fourths were very special. They were incredible fun. Yeah, and I'm just so honored to have been a part of it. All right, so may you have a blessed day, and may God richly bless you. Enjoy the day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Blessings. Bye.